T'es prête?
Oui.
Excellent. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Talk to Danielle podcast. I am your host, Danielle C. Baker. And before we start on today's topic, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to whichever channel you're watching or listening to. And something new this season, because we are in season 2, this episode is brought to you by the Self Esteem Doctor, the wonderful Dr. Simone Alicia. So I invite you to have a look at her online academy. I would never talk about, put and mention programs unless I really believed in it. And this is wonderful if you want to help your children develop their self-esteem, their confidence. She has amazing programs for children, for teens, and even for adults. Sometimes we need that help too. So I will put the link in the description and the comments below, and be sure to have a look at it. There are a lot of resources on the Self Esteem Doctor online academy. So today I have an amazing guest. I know I say that every time, but they really are all amazing. But the person that we're introducing today is a colleague. We're both in the world of early childhood education. She does amazing work. I love all of the work that she does, and I'm really excited to have her on. We'll be talking a lot on with the wellness in children and that today. But today I have the wonderful Melanie McDonald. Thank you so much, Melanie, for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Danielle. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Now, I always have long introductions, but do you want to give us just briefly to share your story with us and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been working with children and in the field for about 15 years at this point. But really, I've been working with children, I feel like my whole life. I originally have a child and youth worker diploma from Collège Boréal and worked in that field for a few years. I had worked in daycares all through college and even in high school, and summer camps and those kinds of things. So got to start probably my first time working with kids at about 15, maybe even 14 years old. And so once I graduated from child and youth worker, I worked at actually Children's Aid and child welfare for a few years before ending up in the Best Start hubs. Worked there for many years. And eventually, the early childhood education just kept coming back. It just kept coming back. So I ended up going to get my second diploma in early childhood education, and tried out, a supervisor position for a while, and eventually made my way to where I am today as a facilitator. I offer workshops and create resources for the French part of early childhood education in Ontario. So that's kind of how I got here. I'm also a mom and a wife and a sister and a cousin. And I feel like I've always kind of taken care of kids since as long as I can remember. So their development and the way they think and all of that is very, very curious. Like, I'm very curious about that and intriguing. And I don't think it's something I'll ever get bored of.
Yeah, you can never get bored when you're working with children, that's for sure.
No.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because in the world of even teaching in general education, a lot of the people that are in that field will say I just always gravitated towards working with children. It's more of a calling than it is a job. We certainly don't do it for the money, and
Right.
we just do it. It's a calling. You have to be.
Yeah, I always say
I
it's part of my just life. It's not what I
Yeah,
do. It's not necessarily my job. It's part of my life.
exactly.
My life is part of early childhood education, and early childhood education is part of my life. There's no off switch. You don't stop being an educator at 4:00 because your shift is done, It's not how
Exactly.
it
Yeah, no,
works.
it's so true. It's always on, even when you're out shopping and you see children, you just automatically switch into educator mode. That's so funny. Um, can you mention, because you've kind of done a wide spectrum in the field, touching on all sorts of different job positions. Is there a defining moment where you knew you needed to make to kind of like an active contribution to how we see the world of childhood, early childhood education. A lot of people not quite sure where we stand as educators. So when was there a defining moment where you said, no, I'm going to actively participate in changing how the world sees us as educators?
Absolutely. So I've been known to be an advocate on this subject on a, regularly an advocate for, just our recognition and our pay and all of that, but just generally that the public sees us as more than a babysitter. We're not babysitters, right? We are educators. Right. We educate. We know the development of children. We are people who are very in tune to these kinds of things and can help parents and community at wide help raise healthy, well-rounded children. So as far as a defining moment, I think that it would have to be, so sometimes you have to go low and over in order to climb back up that mountain. But I think having a burnout myself and seeing the burnout rates in the sector kind of shook me up at one point. And I went like this, I was supervisor in a early childhood center and burning out, and everyone around me was burning out. And I'm going like, what is wrong? Why is this the impossible job? Why is this? So I feel like I didn't know it then, but now in retrospect, that's the defining moment where it's like, how can we make this better? How can we make the sector better mental health wise for our good, people to look up to for this next generation if we're not taking care of ourselves? So a lot of my work these days consists of creating resources to make this sector better, to talk a little bit more about that mental health stuff, to on a personal note and on a professional note, just put it out there a lot more. And I think by showing what we're made of, it's changing it slowly but surely. I think the pandemic also helped with that, but seeing the role that educators play in not just a child's life, but a community's life, and being recognized for that hard work and that role we play.
Yeah, and you really touched on something important there, that impossible job. I love that you put that, because I didn't have a word for it, but now I do. And
it's the impossible job.
It's the impossible job. And we keep saying something needs to change, but it seems like nothing is changing. And like yourself, I did have to go through a burnout. I had to hit rock bottom to realize, okay, no, there's something I can do, because it seems so overwhelming to say we can't change this, but we can with one person at a time. So that's why I love watching what you do, because you reach out, we're talking about it, which we never used to, is saying we need support and it's got to get better. And
and we have to talk about it.
Yes,
I think the first step, we keep saying things have to happen. Well, in order for things to happen, we have to talk about it. We have to say, hey, we're burning out. Hey, we need resources. And if we don't have those conversations, nothing will change. I think that's the first step, is to have these open convos. Because when I say it's the impossible job, it's not the impossible job in the sense, like, I'm just going to explain the weight of the job for me was maintaining all these relationships. When you think about it, okay, you have the relationships with the children, you have the relationships with their families, you have the relationships with the community, you have the relationships with your staff, and in order to support all of those relationships, well, you don't also have time for the paperwork, the ministry, this, right? Like, it's the impossible job. Yeah. So how can we make that better, to make the whole sector just generally better?
That's right. There's only so many hours in a day. And at one point, we just run out. We can't do it all. And I love that. You did mention the pandemic, and I think there's quite a few people who realized what we go through once they had to stay home and be with the family. And we often talk about the negative side of the pandemic. A lot have happened, but I like to kind of switch that up and ask you, are there any positive changes that you've seen in the last 2-3 years where the pandemic kind of forced us to change things and to look at things differently. Can you think of anything
Absolutely.
positive that came out of that?
Oh, absolutely. There's lots of positive. I think that the pandemic also gave us a break. There was a lot of creativity that happened, a lot of innovative stuff that
Mhm.
came out. I mean, pre-pandemic, it was very hard to reach our educators and to offer them any kind of workshops or professional development. With the advancement of Zoom and being able to do this virtually and all of that, it's not the perfect solution, but we're able to reach a lot more people and get a lot more infos and book studies and conversations going with people all over the place. I think there's
Mhm.
been a great exchange between like provinces and even around the world of practices and stuff because we have more access to all of this wonderful information. I also think that educators are finding their voice. Like we're having this conversation today. We're
Yeah.
not the only ones having these conversations. And I feel that it's not conversations that were happening 10 years ago.
Mhm.
So I think
Yes.
slowly but surely people are finding their voice and going, okay, this is what we deserve. This is how we want to move forward. This is how we want to be seen.
Mhm.
And I think those are all positive steps in the right
Yeah.
direction.
No, absolutely.
We're also not talking about a sector that's that old, in the
Mhm.
sense that I really realized this. I did a one of my interviews with people who were there at the beginning of when like childcare became a public service. And
Mhm.
we're only talking about like, 30, 40
Yeah.
years ago at most that this became. So we're in a wave of change. But really it's the first wave of change in this sector because we're
Yeah.
a relatively young sector.
That is so true. I think even our generation probably was one of the first ones who were introduced to after school
Mhm.
programs or childcare or going to school for kindergarten, but when it was introduced. And
Late
that's a good point.
80s, like
Late 80s. Yeah.
late
That's,
80s, that
yeah.
daycares became like a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so much has happened since that there is a need
Mhm.
for a change. It's not the same reality as
Yeah,
back in the day. So the families need additional resources. They need something different, and the staff to support them. Well, they need it. They need also an update on what they're being recognized as. Um,
exactly. Yeah.
I know
Because
you
as
do
much
a
as
lot
things
of.
changed, as much as things change, they stay the same. So there's
Yeah,
some pieces that need to move because they haven't, right? We need to progress and bit with the
yeah,
times, but other stuff, it's still some of the same problems we've had since 1980.
that's
So
so true.
yeah,
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 and I
it's
think
a
that's probably a positive side of the pandemic is, in a certain sense, is people were resisting change, but now we were kind of forced to make some of the changes. So there was a little bit, but yes, you're right. It's still kind of, well, we've always done it this way, so let's keep it up. But it's not a reality anymore. So
exactly, yeah.
uh, I know you talk a lot of, or you do a lot of work on well-being, mental health awareness, especially for both children, but for adults as well. We both kind of have to be attuned to that. So, with your experience and everything that you've witnessed and you've gone through, what do you think there's things that we should be taught at an early age, just to help, if we could say, what could we be teaching young children, so that they could be more attuned, to their mental health and the needs that they would have later on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I feel like if you're from my generation or older, we were taught a different way, right? Like
Mhm.
we weren't taught to identify our emotions. We weren't taught to like respect our emotions in a certain way. Like, right? You're almost like
Yeah.
asked to turn them off or to like, that's enough crying, those kinds of approaches. And
Hmm.
I think most of us, if you're raised in the 70s, 80s, 90s, is all kind of the same approach at different degrees. And I think that what we're doing right these days is that, right? We're really from a very young age, and I think it needs to keep going and we need to be doing more of it. But at a very young age, we're teaching how to identify emotions within ourselves. We're creating resources,
Hmm.
as many as we need. but
Right.
we're getting there. So what do I think we should be teaching them is emotional regulation, is how to identify that, is self-confidence, is
Mhm.
how to be kind, like just how to be kind. And how do we teach that? By doing it ourselves, right? Like we are the models.
Mhm.
So I think those are the kinds of things that need to be, they're first and foremost. If you
Yeah.
don't know how to be kind, another thing is like just how to take criticism, or not even
Mhm.
criticism, but just my French is coming out, la rétroaction, like how to
Yeah. Like
how
feedback.
to
Yeah.
how to, because that's hard. You're going to take, someone is going to tell you, like your
Yeah.
boss or your teacher, or for the rest of your life, you're going to be, given feedback. There is the word,
That-
given
yeah.
feedback. And how do you take that? I know that me as
That's
an
right.
adult, like I had to learn how to take feedback. It's not something I learned as a child. And that's something if
Yeah.
no one can give you any kind of feedback, how are you going to grow, right? So,
Right.
and dealing with
Exactly.
the emotions attached to getting those kinds of feedback. So it all comes back to emotional regulation, recognizing emotions, and
Mhm.
you know and developing those strategies so that you can be a well-rounded adult who doesn't crumble at the minute your boss tells you, you could have done better.
That's right. Yeah, and it doesn't mean that they don't like you. If there's that feedback, whether it's positive or negative, it doesn't mean that the person hates you. They just exactly they want you to be
Yeah,
better.
yeah,
And why wouldn't you want to be better? So, yeah, that's great. And you really hit it on the head there with saying this isn't taught at school. And that's why we need to integrate this. It's not something that we need to learn in therapy once we're adults to figure out.
yeah,
If we did this early on, we make it so much easier for our children to cope, especially with the realities that they're dealing with now that we didn't have. Um, so
yeah.
it's a good start. I know we mentioned, because we talked about this before, and I've seen it more and more in the families that I work with. But when we're talking about a loss,
Mm,
um, and a lot of people will associate loss to mourning, like there was a death,
mhm.
somebody passed away. But for children, a loss can be as trivial, if we could say. I don't like that word, but it could just mean we've changed our schedule, or
Yeah.
uh,
Oh yeah.
we changed their shoes because they got a size bigger. So it doesn't have to be as dramatic as this person is gone forever, but it's just we've had a change, and to them, because of the way their brain functions, it's a loss. um, and how we teach them to go through that loss has an impact on them later on
Oh,
in
absolutely.
life. So what are your experiences with that challenges, and what kind of advice could you give parents on recognizing that it's a loss? They're not just being
Mhm.
difficult, but
Yeah.
this
Oh,
impacts the
absolutely. Yeah, I
emotion.
have some this is more my mom hat now at this point. But I've been through, right? I have two young boys. And we're lucky enough to not have lived any huge losses in our life. But just because you haven't had a huge loss, like, someone in your family passes away, God forbid, or something like that, doesn't mean that the child doesn't live mini grief and mini, um, loss every day. And I mean, it took me a while to understand that that's what was going on with my son at one point. And then once I did, I mean, I was able to then go look for strategies and whatnot. And I mean, I do this for a living, but I ended up having to go consult. It was my youngest was mourning the loss of his daycare. He was going to school and daycare was over, and the kind, wonderful lady that had taken care of my children for many, many years was retiring, and she closed, she sent the last little troop off to school and closed her daycare. And my son went through many months actually of mourning, but it took me a while to realize he was grieving a loss. He was grieving a loss of that routine. He was grieving the loss of that his educator that he had for all of those years. She was still around, but it wasn't the same for him. And he was very angry with us. So, I mean, what seems like, you said it earlier, sometimes trivial to us, that he was going through this was huge for him. So, as much as I've got every resource under the sun and access to everything, it's not the same when it's your own. And I think that as educators or teachers or whatever, we seem to think like, I should have this solution. I should know, I do this with 26 kids in a classroom, but I can't do it with my own. And I think we need to forgive ourselves for that. I think that that's how it works. The strategy that worked on your 26 students isn't going to work on your own child. It's just
the way it is.
The world works. So I had to get over that. And I ended up consulting, a psychotherapist, and just kind of like, hey, here's what's going on. I consulted her twice. She was able to kind of guide me through that, explained to me, he's grieving, like this child is grieving, and here's how you can support it. So it was a lot of just like, stuff like reminiscing or talking about, or when he brought up the situation, just greeting the emotion as it was, helping support him through that, and reinstating this like confidence in us that like we didn't tear the, like, look, we love you, right? Like, because it was like this, it was our fault, right? In his little head that this was happening. So I mean, that was a big one, actually. That's a big loss. Sometimes they're not that big, right? Sometimes it's okay, you're 4 and it's, we're done with soothers.
Right.
Right? Like, okay, we're, or you lost your blankie. Like, I don't know about you guys, but my kids have blankies. And I know that if a blankie gets left at camp one night, or if they ever lost their blankie, let me tell you, it would be a whole grief.
Yeah, that's something big. A blanket or a favorite teddy bear, or their spot, their favorite spot on the couch. Yeah.
And I remember my oldest, it was exactly that situation. He was 4, he still had a soother. And eventually it was like, okay, like, and he was playing, you know what I mean? Like he'd hide the soother so that we'd have to find it before bedtime. Like, he was playing games. So it was time. If you're old enough to hide the soother in order to prolong bedtime, it's time to get rid of the soother.
Yeah, exactly.
So got rid of the soother, did a whole thing. He knew exactly what was going on. We handed the soother to the baby cousin, right? It's his soother now, all of that. He was like grieving and sobbing, he'd be good all day. When it was bedtime and he'd realize, oh, soother's gone. Oh, he would just, he called it sis. So he would like cry and sis. And so for 4 nights, I'm like, and at one point my husband's like, okay, how long are we going to do this for? Like rub his back while he cries sis. And I'm like, he just lost his best friend, his confidant, his security blanket, for us, it's just a soother. For him, it's a huge part of his world. For the last 4 years, sis is like what got him to sleep. Yeah. So, I mean, is it annoying sometimes? Of course. Do we get, out of patience? And of course.
Oh, God, yes.
Right? Like, of course we do. But then I just put myself in, how big is this for him? For me, it's this big. For him, it's this big. So his emotion is warranted, and all I can do, my job isn't to shut that emotion down. My job is to say, all right, you're living big emotions and I'm here if you need me. And I hope your big emotion passes soon. But if it doesn't, I'll be here anyways,
That's right.
It's not without saying, like, I'm very realistic in that sense of like, being a parent isn't always great. Like sometimes it's annoying, sometimes it's tiring. It's like I don't have patience. So like I don't have patience on a good day. So like
And it's good to mention that, yeah, because a lot of parents come to us for advice and we have all the advice, but if only they knew that we're going through
That's
the
the
exact same
thing.
thing at home. Yeah. Yeah.
And like, I can sit here and give you strategies all day. It doesn't mean that they're going to work with my kids. So I think we have to be kind to ourselves. And I'm like saying this message as I'm also taking it in, because I think we do need to be just kinder to ourselves as parents, as educators, just as people that have kids around them in any capacity. Like, it's not easy raising kids. But I think that we can tap into a little bit more compassion and maybe find a little bit more patience or whatnot if we can see it through their eyes. If we can see that loss, that little loss for me is gigantic for him. So it makes it easier to swallow and easier to be there.
And to kind of calm ourselves down to say, oh yeah, I forgot. It's just like if we were living a big emotion and somebody would say, well, it's not a big deal, and calm down. That usually triggers.
Yeah, right. No one in the history of calm down has ever calmed down.
Calmed down. That's right. And that kind of leads into my next question, because we were kind of talking about it now, but what advice or tip would you give to parents, teachers, or educators on how to guide a child? Like, let's say, okay, this is happening. I'm aware that this may seem like nothing to me, but it's a big deal for the child. How can you guide them through to kind of reassure them that this will pass and it'll get better?
I very much feel like we're these children's thermostat in a sense. And they will follow our rhythm. If we are frantic, if we hop in, if they're high and we jump into their high attitude, high energy, they will increase. If when they go high, we go low, usually they'll come meet you at least halfway. So if I go back to your question of advice and tips, I did go into it, just be kind with ourselves, realize we're not going to do everything perfectly. Like, everyone has a reason to go to therapy when they're 30 years old. It doesn't matter who you are and how perfect of a parent. Every single person on the face of the planet will have a reason to go to therapy when they're 30. So, I mean, you're not going to do things perfectly.
No, but I like that analogy that you said about the thermostat, is that our initial reaction will set the tone for the rest of their lives. Yeah, because like you said, and I say this often, children don't listen to us, they watch us. So if we react as strongly as they're looking to us for comfort. So if we're just stressing them out or belittling their emotion and making them feel bad for feeling that way, it's not going to help. But yeah, being that thermostat is okay. Where do I need to gauge them? If they're going to follow me, then where do I want them to be? And this is where I need to show up. I think that's a great way to start, is taking notice of where you're at. And then engaging
because
them.
Often when I'm like, the kids are driving me crazy. Oh, either their energy is super high or it's very negative. There's lots of whining happening. I'm like, hold on a second. I'm pretty whiny right now. And I've been pretty negative for the last 2-3 days. And then once I become conscious of it, it's like, okay, it's not always easy, but like, let's turn this around. And they'll follow you. They just do. That's it. You're setting the tone. Same thing in a classroom, right? Like, if the kids are all yelling and you start yelling at them, well, what are you doing? You're just contributing to the noise. Whereas if you go low, they'll come meet you halfway. So I think that just, I think reflection and self-reflection is a very, very powerful tool. It's I feel like what kind of got me to where I am today is always kind of reflecting on how can I do that better? How can I do that differently? Analyzing that, sometimes too much, but don't we all? But yeah, like, I think it's listening to them. And also, like, I just wrote an article on that in the Voyageur a few weeks ago, but when like helping support them through any difficult situation, or even answering those difficult questions they have, it's always about gauging, where are they? What do they understand? Where are they in their development? What can they handle? Like, right, when they're asking you a difficult question, throw it back. Like, I always throw it back to get a gauge of, like, where is he at? You know, and I used the example of, he asked me how the baby was going to come out of my sister-in-law's belly at one point. And like, I was prepping for an anatomy lesson. Let me tell you, I was just like ready for it. All right, buddy, we're talking about this. And I just threw it back at him first, right, to see where he's at. And I said, well, how do you think the baby comes out? And he says, well, it's a very little baby, so I think they make a very little incision and they take the baby out. And I was like, huh, yeah, you're right.
Wow.
That's one of the ways that they do it. There's other ways, but that's one of the ways. He was like, oh, cool. Do they get a scar? And he was all about the scar. There was no anatomy lesson.
There was no baby.
All of this extra info and maybe like stuff he wasn't ready for, if I wouldn't have just asked, hey, what do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think about that? And then you can gauge. Okay, he's there. He understands this. We're going to go up to there this time. And next time I can add a little bit of info, but I'm not throwing stuff that can cause anxiety, that can cause, just stuff you're not ready to hear yet.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think
they're not prepared for it.
Yeah, I think gauging is very, very important in loss, in those hard questions, in any kind of anxieties these kids are living, especially post-pandemic. There's lots of anxieties out there. I think that we need to ask them where they're at before throwing stuff at them.
That is a really, really good point. Yeah, meet them where they are, not where you think they should be. That even works for adults, to be honest with you. Sometimes we could get ourselves out of so many situations if we just ask, okay, well tell me what you think about this before I traumatize you. Yeah. Oh, that's good. I could talk to you about this all day, and I'm sure there's a lot of you, we could do a whole episode just on that alone. But let's switch it up a little bit. Is there anything, because you're busy. You're very busy. Is there something that you would like to share? And I'm putting you on the spot, but you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But anything you'd like to share with us, something that people don't know about you that you would like to share? It could be like a hobby, a talent, or I don't know. Okay.
I don't think the general public would know. Like I've written many kids' books that were just sitting in my journals. And there's a fun fact. I have written in a journal every day since I was 9 years old.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's commitment. Wow.
Yeah. And so to write these books, I've been going back into my 9-10-year-old journals. Actually, I was just doing that.
That is so
Mary
cool.
Kate and Ashley.
Oh, yeah.
1999 in there.
Love it.
So I've been going back through them. It's been a lot of fun. And kind of pulling from those experiences as a 9 and 10-year-old to put in my books. So eventually,
that's amazing.
Eventually they'll go somewhere, but yeah.
Oh, that is fantastic. I'm so glad I got to ask this, because I just learned something incredible about you even more.
Been writing in a journal every day since about 9. I think my first journal is 1996, which I'm 87, so I was 9 years old. The first one that I have.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's amazing. And you kept them all. That's also an accomplishment. That's a lot of people that keep them. So I feel amazing.
Like there's probably a few from high school missing. Those high school years where you're like mad and might like throw one away or whatnot. But generally, I have most of them.
That's right. Yeah, we burn those.
Yeah, those difficult teenage moments there, they didn't make the archive.
No, that's okay. I think the 9-year-old ones will probably be more fun anyway.
Oh, they're hilarious. Like I'm
Yeah.
constantly texting my sisters because it's like I had a fight with my sister, and like I'm sending them pictures of these diary entries from 1996, and we're dying. Like it's hilarious.
Oh, that's hilarious.
9-year-old problems.
Seriously. And that's when you go back and say, okay, yeah, this is where I can help people have been through it.
Yeah.
We've come a long way.
Yeah.
Is there any advice you wish you would have had sooner just to make your life easier? Is there something that you wish you would have known earlier in your life?
I think to just go for it. Like
Yeah.
I hesitated many years. Like this idea of books and stories I've had,
Mhm.
you doubt yourself. You think that's not important. That's not even good to like that. And
Right.
what I'm realizing is that no one will do the same thing as you the same way.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
to just throw it out there and see what happens. And I feel like a lot of my projects, a lot of these, I'm sitting here today with you because I just went for it. I started making YouTube videos and, I get to
Mhm.
do this kind of stuff a little bit more now. I did a little bit of public speaking. I've done, but it's always just like, just go for it and have confidence in what you're doing isn't
Mhm.
done the same way as anybody else. So
Yeah.
it's original and take a chance, throw it out there and see what comes of
Mhm.
it. So far it's gone well for me, but I think that by also doing that, like I hope that I'm serving as a good model to the children that are around me and seeing, take a
Right.
chance, have confidence and take a chance and try something new and take your creative juices and try and create something with it. Like, did I think that at 36 I'd be reevaluating my 9-year-old journals to be writing books? No, absolutely not. But sometimes you just gotta
That's
check it
just where
out and
life
see
brings
what
you. Yeah.
happens. Something.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think just and like I said earlier, just being kind to ourselves and doing the best we can. We're never going to
Yeah,
do a parenting or an educator job perfectly, but
that's right.
we can try. We can
We
try.
could try, but yeah, which is some really good advice. Um, Now, what's coming up? That's you mentioned a few things, but what's coming up next for you? What are you, if you could kind of share what your next project is or your next goal that you like to work on.
Yeah, I would actually love to go back to school and get my bachelor's degree in either education or social work or something. I had started my bachelor's degree years ago and never finished. So I would really like that. On a professional note, I mean, I'm 4 years strong with l'AFCO, and
Mhm.
I don't plan on going anywhere. The projects are always very interesting and lots
Yeah.
of stuff coming that I can't talk too much about it, but stay tuned,
No.
I have, mes petites jasettes pédagogiques, and
Mhm.
those will keep going. And I plan on keep creating, because I also create les petites jasettes pédagogiques are a FACO project, but I also have on my YouTube channel just documentation of that I've done with my own family, just to
Okay.
show development, and we've explored like all the different types of risky play and those kinds of just informative little videos that I've done with my own
Right.
family. I plan on keep on doing those. I mean, kids are
That's
just
cool.
so interesting and I love
Mhm.
documenting, so more of those to come. And yeah, just I don't know, we'll see where the wind takes me, but those
That'll keep you busy for a while. Yeah.
yeah, and watch out for those books. I mean, there's going to be books
Yeah.
coming out. Follow me on Facebook and for all of the new stuff to come.
The new stuff. I'm so excited about those. Actually, I can't wait to see them. But before we give them the information on where they can find you, I always ask this question at the end of an interview. And you working with children, you'll understand it. But the very big question of what do you want to be when you grow up?
I for a long time that the answer to that was like I've always had this fascination, well, you know, musical theater, all that,
Yeah.
but this fascination with just TV, movies, all
Mm.
of that. So it used to be, I want to be like a talk show host. Like I want to be Oprah Winfrey. I want to be like a talk show host, but I kind of feel like I am,
Mhm. Yeah,
right?
you
Like I've gotten to
yeah.
through my interviews and all of that. I kind of feel like I am a talk show host. It's I do not have a great studio. I mean, it's in my laundry room, literally. But
It's a start.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe one day I will have my own talk show. I have no idea. But I kind of feel like I'm fulfilling that dream one YouTube video at a time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's what I love asking that question. Everybody has such a different answer, but
Mhm.
it always comes back to I'm pretty much there. Like I'm pretty much want to be, or I think that's
Yeah.
amazing. And
And
yeah,
if
I consider you like a
a
talk
talk show
show,
host.
like a public figure for early
Yeah.
childhood education for sure.
Thank you.
That's
That's fun to
awesome.
hear. I went to the
Mhm.
social last year and I was like, I want to be a talk a host on this show. And they just announced one of the hosts is leaving. I was like, oh, I should apply.
There you go. It's open just for you.
Can you imagine?
That's
Oh,
right.
that's funny.
That'd be so cool.
Um, when actually it's funny, because when I reread one of my first journals at the beginning, it's asks, right, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Mhm.
And it was a kindergarten teacher at
Oh
8
my
years
goodness.
old. Yeah, 9 years old or
Oh,
whatever. I had already written I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher.
that is amazing. You know,
Yeah.
it's something that in therapy, because I do have some background on that, is one of the things that usually when we're trying to help somebody find their purpose or their passion, um, it usually boils down to that age group. You know, between the ages of 7 to 12 is usually when you know exactly what you want to be,
Yeah.
and you're right in it, right in the middle of it. That's so awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Now I could honestly, I could talk to you for days, but
I
we're
feel the
gonna have to
same
wrap it
way.
up. Yeah. Now, how can people follow you, reach you, see, you know, what's coming up with the wonderful work that you do, or get the resources that you hand out there? I will add them to the description of this episode so that they can contact you. But what's the best way to see to see where you're at?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Facebook. So my Facebook is Melanie McDonald EPEI TES. So EPEI TES. Oh boy, that was not natural. Um
You have to do the
so
switch to French for a minute there.
yeah, it's like when you know a
Yeah.
phone number in English and then you try to say it in
Yeah.
French or the other way around, just it's
Yeah.
not natural.
And those initials don't help with the I being the E and the E being the I.
Oh,
That's just, yeah. But I'll write it down
lots of
in the
brain power there.
description.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can find me on Facebook. I post my in the summer it's every 2 weeks, but during the school year, I post a video per week. So they're posted on there, but they're also on my YouTube channel, La Pédagogie avec Melanie. Kind of where you can find
Perfect.
for your French early childhood resources.
That's right. All right. I'll add those up. And thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really glad you came on, and there's so much more that you could share with us, but that's why I invite everybody to go have a look. Really some nice stuff, easy to follow, and very simple to listen and watch to. So thank you again
Well,
so
thank
much
you.
for joining me today, and I'm sure we'll do this again. We have to.
Yeah,
It's too
anytime,
much fun.
anytime. Yes,
Too much fun.
considering I want to be a talk show, I mean, I can talk. That's not a
There you
problem.
go. We'll get you talking.
Awesome. Well,
Excellent.
thank you very much,
Thank
Danielle.
you. And for everybody watching or listening to this episode, don't forget again to like, subscribe, and follow both myself and Melanie. And until then, stay safe, stay awesome, and we'll talk soon.